Hi, it's Nikki here from Happy Hormones for Life, and today's very special guest is Rebekah Brown. Now, she is the founder and chief guinea pig at MPowder, a product I really, really love. She has spent her career helping other companies to build brands and products as a researcher and a creative consultant, and then the peri-menopause arrived. And I'm going to let her tell her story, but eventually it led to her giving all that up and actually doing her own research and creating a product that really, really helped her, but is also helping a lot of other women. So welcome, Rebekah.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. I've been looking forward to this. Tell us a little bit about your story and what happened and why you ended up here.
Wow. So it's a long, convoluted one, so I'll keep it short. I, as you were saying in your intro, had spent my whole career as a researcher working for brands and businesses, and helping them understand target audience and helping them understand, I guess, the wants and needs of people. And I loved my job. I did it, right from leaving university and relished it. And about 2 years ago now, I began noticing that I felt less and less able to do it. I suppose that's the best way of describing it. And I struggled with a number of things. The most crippling for me was anxiety. So suddenly, everyday things I'd sort of taken in my stride, and the experience I'd gained over sort of 20 years of practicing as a researcher, all of that seemed to sort of melt away. And I became more and more convinced that I really wasn't up to my job. I had brain fog. I couldn't articulate myself properly. I was struggling to sleep, so that was having an impact as well. I had a glorious outbreak of hormonal acne, which felt very unfair because I'd had it as a teenager as well. So skin had always been something that I guess I'd been felt sort of quite self-conscious about, and it came back with a vengeance. So a lot of my job was standing up in front of people and presenting findings, and to feel, that I couldn't speak properly. I didn't look like me anymore. I was bloated. Everything felt like it was accumulating, and I really didn't know what was going on. Like 75% of women in the UK, I went to the doctor in the end, and I'd done a little bit of wiki Googling, which isn't necessarily a good idea, but I'd done that, and I went in, and his response to me was, well, you're far too young to be menopausal. And
how old were you, by the way, at that age?
I was 45
at
that point. So, again, I mean, this will be very familiar to you, I'm sure, in terms of the people that you support in your clinic. But I think the assumption so often with the medical community is that if you're not sort of 51, 52, there is nothing that happens before that. Menopause is this sort of window, this anniversary. So, and I think also for women at this stage of life, which is definitely true for me, they'll make a sort of an assumption based on your lifestyle. It was absolutely true that I was juggling a career and family and parents who had sort of increased needs. And so then it very much becomes a discussion about your lifestyle and your ability to cope with anxiety, and perhaps you're depressed, and perhaps what you really need is antidepressants. He was dismissive, and I kind of regret not going back and fighting my corner. But I think the reality, again, for many women is when you're feeling so low, it's really hard to sort of battle. So what I ended up doing, which was what he advised me to do, was taking a trip to my local health food store, and seeing if I could kind of supplement to address some of the sort of anxiety and the exhaustion I was feeling. I really didn't want to go onto antidepressants. And because I'd done my wiki Googling, I kind of felt like I must be perimenopausal. And I was lucky in the sense that word and that term had just started hitting the media. I think if I'd been a few years earlier, it really wasn't. Yeah, it really wasn't something people talked about, was it? So I went into my local health food store hoping to find something for perimenopause. And I think what struck me, and I've talked about this quite a lot, is as a researcher, I probably had my research head on when I was in that aisle. And the first thing that struck me is it felt like an end-of-life aisle. So I was kind of like... all of the women on the packaging looked like they were sort of in the mid-70s to 80s. It felt frail. All of the pictures were women looking sort of angst-ridden and vulnerable, and it didn't feel like a territory I necessarily wanted to be in. And I couldn't find anything for perimenopause, so it felt really blunt. It was like, okay, so you're menopausal, here's a generic multivitamin. And when I started looking at the back of the pack, I worried because I didn't understand enough about the ingredients. I didn't understand how long I should be taking this stuff. And I wasn't convinced to the sort of the dosage levels and the kind of quality of what was in those supplements. And that's really where MPowder began. It wasn't a conscious decision to go off and make something, but I knew that I couldn't find what I was looking for on the shelves. And I started by, again, probably because of my background, researching what was out there, what sort of potential could be found in different ingredients, what was the efficacy of some of these ancient herbs and remedies that were on these shelves. Where was the dosage levels to ensure that I understood that if I did take something, I was taking the right amount to actually sort of change things and impact on my symptoms. So it was a very long journey, and I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a naturopath, I'm not a doctor. So all I was able to do really was assimilate all of this data, which is what I do. That's what I like doing, sort of put it all into one place. And then I started using myself as a guinea pig. So I fundamentally changed the way that I was eating and what I was putting on my plate. I also looked holistically at what I was doing in terms of lifestyle. And then as I started to feel better, that I felt that there was something that should be in market that wasn't there. And that was the point that I pulled in the people that actually know what they're doing. So, I started collaborating with a really experienced naturopath and herbalist who'd worked with women for a very long time going through menopause. And she was able to sort of overlay the real life experience of her clients onto the data that I'd gathered. And then with a doctor, we were able to look at the way that, these blends would work together. So the sort of the interplay of different ingredients, make sure that we were also building stuff. And I think this is something that's quite often not understood by women because the information just isn't out there. But a lot of these remedies, although they're natural, they pack a really powerful punch, and you shouldn't take them for long periods of time. So understanding all of the nuances about putting something into a blend that women could safely take for the transitions that their bodies go through, so distinct recipes for peri-menopause, menopause and postmenopause, and really an ethos that says nutrition is a foundation layer, and it's what you do around it as well that's really, really important. And that was the beginnings of MPowder. And sort of a year and a half on, we've got our first product in market. We're currently testing our MenoBoost, which is being tested by our community at the moment. And yeah, it's been a really exciting journey, but it's not one I necessarily intended to take, but I'm very glad I did.
Oh, amazing. It's such an amazing story to go from doing something completely unrelated to have something happen to you and then see the massive gap in the market for something like this, and for the millions of women that are suffering from menopause. We all go through it. So it literally is millions. So amazing journey. What is it that's I know you've got the 3 stages. Just tell us a little bit about the peri-meno and the post, and just what kind of different things we need in those 3 stages.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the thing I think that struck me the most. It feels like, I think, I refer back to sort of the multivitamin sort of space of the mid 1980s, and it feels like a lot of the menopause sector is still in the 1980s, actually, in terms of the way that it markets the kind of the sort of sophistication of what's in the space. And for me, that was the biggest gap. Was I understood that menopause is an 8 to 10, sometimes a little bit longer period of a woman's life. And during that period, again, you will know as a nutritionist, our hormone fluctuations differ. So, in the perimenopause, it's often almost like the roller coaster phase. And that's when your hormones are fluctuating the most. And there's things there nutritionally that you can do to address those hormone fluctuations quite effectively. I mean, I've been lucky enough to listen to you a number of times talk on this subject. And so with the Peri Boost, our intention is to help those hormone fluctuations naturally. So all of our ingredients are plant-based ingredients. They're vegan, and they're designed to harness those hormones naturally. And then what we did through trial data and working with our community was also look to include ingredients that were addressing other core symptoms that happen in menopause. And I think, again, there's often a sort of misconception that, menopause equals hot flashes and brain fog. And so often, particularly in the perimenopause, it's looking at some of the other overriding symptoms. And for us in the community we've been working with, bloating is a really, really big one. That kind of discomfort, the kind of the sense that your gut isn't absorbing and sort of consuming in the way that it was before. So looking at ingredients that can kind of help with gut health and bloating specifically. Skin, obviously was a real issue for me and is a real issue for many women in our community, not just the sort of the outbreak that I saw, but rosacea, dryness, brittleness of nails and hair texture changing. So we looked to herbs that would support that. And that's been one of the real delighting factors of Peri-Boost, is we found a member of the mint family, which has got a fantastic name as well. It's called Moldavian Dragonhead. And it's been used,
Sounds like me.
Yeah, exactly. I know it does. It feels like it needs its own little meme, but it's something that's been used for generations, as is often the case with these herbs. But what was particularly interesting to us was the fact that a company called Biochemical had been working with it as a botanical extract in lab. So we were able to access a lot of data around its ability to stimulate collagen and support the body's ability to produce, rather than inputting collagen. It actually stimulates collagen, and the results they'd seen in lab were really, really promising. And for us, it's been really exciting to see that played out in our consumer environment. So women will track their symptoms with us. It's one of the sort of key differentiators of MPowder, is that we provide a tracking service alongside our product, so that we can ensure it's doing what it should do, but also we can intervene if it's not. So if we see someone still really struggling with bloating, for example, sort of 3 weeks into taking our product, then we will intervene with a call. We'll put them in contact with one of our nutritionists and we'll work further with them. So what we're seeing—
is that free of charge, Rebekah? Do you actually just include that as a service?
It is, and the reason for that is, we're a small company. Our product is very, very carefully sourced. It's got 24 ingredients in each blend, but it's not cheap. It's something that you invest in, and for us, it's really important it then does what it should. And also, we'll never be able to be right for everybody, but we work really, really hard to ensure that we provide the support around the supplement. So although it is a powder, it really is a community, and so not everyone signs up for that tracker, but it's free. And if they do, it's that our ability then to be able to sort of tap into their data each week and make those proactive calls where we're able to introduce them to wonderful people in our community, who can provide that extra layer. Because I think the other thing that's really important about MPowder and its philosophy is that we're not a silver bullet. So we will do everything we can to deliver that nutritional foundation you need. But sometimes it's looking at sleep hygiene. Sometimes it's looking at your exercise or your water intake. It's other things like that can sometimes really tip the balance for women. So but what's great is it means that not only do we get to support women, but the data that keeps coming back allows us to iterate with our recipes. So back to your point about what differs across the different blends. For Peri-Boost, we were able to focus on the symptoms we knew were troubling women the most, because we were getting that data coming in, and that's been really critical to us, because it's allowed us to do a far more nuanced recipe that really is reflective of symptoms that women are feeling, rather than what media tells us we should expect to feel during menopause. So with Peri, skin has been really interesting, and a real— I'm delighted that has made such an impact to women, because I think it's one of those things that it has such an impact on your confidence, and we've had women who sort of had lost eyebrows in part of their perimenopause journey and have seen them starting to grow back. So stuff like that's just, makes me very, very happy. So ingredients in Peri-Boost focus on those specific areas. So as I say, sort of bloating. We look a lot at anxiety. We look at the mineral and protein blend that can help with a sort of balancing of hormones, which again impacts on your cortisol levels and your response to anxiety. We look at sleep. So we look at the vitamins and minerals, and magnesium obviously plays a very big part in our blend. But we also look at some of the lignans and other elements that can kind of just help calm the system down. And then conversely, we look at energy. So energy is something that people really lack during perimenopause, and that kind of bone ache that you can get. So again, our blend looks to address those. So there's 7 key symptoms we look at with perimenopause. And then when we move on to menopause, it's much more about sort of looking at that decline that then starts to happen as there's this sort of roller coaster lessens a little bit, and then what's happening to your hormones and where you might need to compensate in terms of what's going on in your body. And in terms of the focus, we're looking a lot more at that point at bone density, but we're also looking at things like cognitive health, and that kind of bleeds into the work we're doing with our post boost, which is in development at the moment, where we're looking at nootropics and the emerging evidence around how you can use herbs and foods to actually ensure that we age well. I think post boost for me is actually perhaps the most interesting area for us as a business, because it's almost like we get through menopause and then all anyone wants to talk to us about is bone density, which is very important, I hasten to add. But for me, potentially our generation is going to be, 40 to 50% of their lives is postmenopausal. So it isn't really about sort of, again, this very sort of frail picture of what old age is and assuming that old age is postmenopause. It's very much for us about, how can you feed your brain and nourish your brain and your body in order to stay active and curious and energized and engaged. And again, a holistic approach to that is really interesting. There's so much now coming out in terms of the foods you can eat to actually de-risk Alzheimer's and dementia and things like that. So all of that work's going into what is called post boost, but it's not, I think post-menopause is just the wrong. Menopause is a difficult word anyway, but post-menopause, the sort of all of the associations with it are really wrong. So again, our blend will look to address a much broader spectrum of sort of nutritional needs for our whole body than you typically see in that kind of post-menopause section of your supermarket.
So you're turning post-menopause into something a lot more positive and inspiring, because it just sounds like your post-life, really, you're just going to be on the scrap heap and not worth anything. Whereas we know actually post-menopause, if you are healthy and you're protecting your brain and everything's working as it should and your hormones are nicely balanced, my goodness, are we a powerful force post-menopause? The things that we can achieve, the wisdom that we've accumulated, and that just becomes part of a new journey for us and a new adventure. And goodness me, some of the the achievements being made by postmenopausal women. And postmenopause, it just sounds like it's just life's all over. It's such a horrible term.
It's such a horrible word. And I totally agree. I think the thing that I found interesting, again, as a researcher, is statistically, we're more likely to be happy and fulfilled post-menopause. We have a greater kind of propensity to find our purpose, the wisdom that we bring into the workplace. We're more likely to succeed as entrepreneurs. I think it's fascinating that there's so many women starting businesses, often sort of identifying niches that haven't been considered. And obviously menopause, it being a niche of 51%, but what's interesting is there's so many businesses bubbling up with women who, like you say, at this life stage have almost found their calling, and it can be a hugely liberating period of life for us, and yet it's so often depicted as everything but, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And how many products are there out there to support postmenopausal women? Hardly any. It's such a massive gap in the market, considering the numbers of women coming through and needing that support. So I applaud you for really making that a real big part of your business, because actually once, your community is the perimenopausal one at the moment, but they're going to get older and they're going to, it's a brilliant business model, isn't it, in terms of that, but you're supporting them at each of those phases, and it's fantastic. So by the time they actually are postmenopausal, wow, they're going to be fierce, aren't they?
We are going to be ruling the world. I think that's I think that's what's coming down the line. I think you're right. I mean, I think what's also really, I found so motivating about the work we've done is because it's a community. There's been such generosity of spirit, and when we first started out, we were researching purely the peri-boost. So we were doing a lot of work to try and understand what it was that women were feeling, where they felt that they were not finding the products and solutions that they wanted, all of that kind of data collection, I guess. And what we kept finding was that postmenopausal women wanted to let us know what they'd learned, and there's real desire for women. If you ask any woman who's kind of transitioned through menopause, one of the first things they'll say to you is, I really wish I knew then what I know now. And what was amazing is that we weren't asking for it, but people were just sending in what had worked, sending in what they had learned, sending in almost the story of their own menopause transition. And that has become very much part of what our community now is. It's women sharing with each other, women passing down. Even when you talk to perimenopausal women, one of their main concerns is pre-menopause women. So women in their early 30s, and they're often saying, I just wish that women would kind of get their head around hormones sooner and actually see it as something that can be harnessed as a very powerful, liberating thing about what makes us unique as a gender. But it's often only once you get into it and you're experiencing the fluctuations firsthand that you realise that you shouldn't have been sort of fighting your menstrual cycle, and you shouldn't have been resenting those mood swings and all those things, because they could have been addressed so much earlier.
Oh, music to my ears. I wish I could reach more younger women, that they were tuning into this, because I want to get them prepared. I want them to be educated about their hormones, so that when by the time that they do start fluctuating and changing, they know what to do about it, and they know what's going on. Because I think that uncertainty of that not knowing what's happening to you, where we always, in your younger years, you'd always have control of what was happening to you generally, but then that control goes away with perimenopause, and you suddenly don't know what's going on with yourself. You lose yourself. And if you know what's happening, that's half the battle, isn't it? It's that then you're not anxious about what's going on with you. And I just wish we were taught about hormones right from school age. I know menopause is sort of being talked about, being on the curriculum for school kids, but actually it should be before that as well. We need to know about our whole hormone journey. And it's what happens to us on a monthly basis, and it's pregnancy and it's puberty, and by the time we get to menopause, we still don't know what our hormones are doing. So if we had that education, my goodness, we'd have a much easier time of it, wouldn't we, generally?
Totally agree.
But what I love about MPowder, Rebekah, and what you've created, is not only this amazing community where you're getting real-time feedback every single day from your own product, which is incredible, because then you know what to change, how to support people in different ways. But the other thing I really love about what you've created is that you are collaborating with loads and loads of different experts in menopause, and the whole journey, to be honest, because there are a lot of experts out there and a lot of different ways of getting help and support. And you are connecting people to all these different ways outside of the medical world and inside. But the medical world is slightly, as we know, have limited resources in this area. And so a lot of practitioners and coaches are working with women to fill that gap. And what you're doing is amazing, because you're building a community, but you're also building a real support network of different practitioners, different skills, different experiences, different expertises. And that's lovely, because it's just widening the choice for your community, but also it's connecting us all as well, and that's a really lovely thing.
I mean, I'm obviously a huge admirer of your work as well, and I think for us, as I say from the very beginning, one of my nervousness actually about entering the supplement space, because that's effectively what we are, is that there's a lot of snake oil in it. And there's a lot of snake oil in it because there's that need for some reason to overpromise, and which I find quite patronizing. So I think women, particularly by the time we reach this point in our lives, we understand that I'm not going to take this tablet today and wake up tomorrow, feeling amazing.
20 years younger.
Yeah, darn it. But yes, I particularly was just tired of being promised that I was going to feel miles better from taking a very low grade dose of something, for like 2 weeks or whatever. So I think it was something that I was very conscious of, and the way that I guess mitigated any risk of overpromise to women who are exhausted and often feeling at the end of their tether by the time they find us, is to be really honest from the beginning as to what it does, to make ourselves accountable in terms of that tracking. Because, ultimately, if we don't work from you, then I don't want you spending money on us anymore. I want you to have a month to track it. And the interesting thing about tracking is it kind of takes away that, am I actually feeling better? Feeling, because I don't know about you, but if I'm trying something, I often forget what I was feeling before anyway, and that's kind of true of topical treatments as well. So it's almost like we capture the snapshot you give us each week, and that means we can play it back to you. And it might be that there's 3 of the symptoms that were really troubling you that have really come down, but there's 2 that have gone up, and something else happened in your life that means you're more anxious this week, or has there been another piece of news that has really exacerbated how you're feeling this week. So we're able to sort of remove the I guess the kind of that sort of confusion as to whether something's actually having an impact, and then it can reassure people as to whether they continue. So that's really important to me as well. And then the community piece in terms of experts is, I think, probably one of the most valuable things we can do at this point in life is stay curious. And for me, I just didn't know where to begin. I didn't know where those people were that were delivering holistic, intelligent solutions that could help me in other ways. And what I've loved is, because I'm learning on a selfish level, I go into all of the workshops and I learn about it, but our community actually drives the direction of travel. So they will be the ones that vote on what we look into next. So, the last month we've done cold water therapy, for example, because women were DMing us and contacting us and voting it up the poll, which is kind of how we agree and how you can kind of influence what we're doing. But they were like, why are so many women in the Lido when we were allowed in Lidos, or why are so many women sort of on the beach at 5 a.m? And, there's a kind of like almost like an instinctive awareness that something must be working for people, because you were just seeing it and it was being written about in the media. But then to be curious and to go off and find the experts that can then tell us what's the science behind cold water therapy in midlife. Why are women seeing a real impact on their hot flashes? What's it doing to our barometer symptoms and our ability to regulate our temperature? So all of that stuff we then go off and find out for you, and find the people that know what they're talking about. And I think, encouraging that and also not judging. So we've got the medical doctors who can talk really intelligently on HRT. We've got the herbalists who can talk really intelligently on ancient remedies and also the efficacy they've seen in real life. And then, people like yourself as well, sort of who kind of approach nutrition with that sort of hormone layer on top, which kind of demystifies what food we should be putting on our plate. And so all of that, I think, is a really important thing to do as a supplement brand, because it then means that we're staying honest,
And so you've got the Peri Boost out at the moment. Meno's about to come out shortly, and then the post you're working on.
Yeah.
And so just tell us what it is. It's a powder, isn't it? So how do you use it?
So it's a powder. It's 3 tablespoons, ideally before lunch. We say that because all of our powders that are in market at the moment, I'm still sort of working on the post boost, so I'm not quite sure what the guidance will be there. But the Meno and the Peri, there's an element in there of energy injection, and it's nice to take advantage of that for as long of the day as you can. So we sort of suggest before lunch. The powders are a blend of about 24 to 30 different ingredients. We made a conscious decision not to put in flavor masks or bulking agents or sweeteners. So they're very functional in taste. Our advice is try them with water. Some people are really happy with that, but a lot of people actually add them into a smoothie if that's your routine. But they're designed to basically incorporate and hopefully be as frictionless and hassle-free as possible. If you have a smoothie, stick it in your smoothie. If you like porridge, put it in your porridge. Take it before lunch, as I say, and consistency is the other key thing. So if you're going to buy, our recommendation is always take it consistently for a month, track with us and see how you go.
Fantastic. It's been amazing talking to you, Rebekah, and I'm going to put all the links in underneath so you can go and try it for yourselves. Thank you so much for being with us.
No, thank you for having me.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.